Hello and welcome to RPG Maker Festival. I am David Listwan. I am the solo dev for Not Allowed to Die Gaming Studios, and we are actually here to discuss not just Dimensional Gate that we released just a few days ago, but we actually want to go over because this is a dev festival in a way. We want to go over how we did a lot of the things that we've done that basically are things that other people haven't been able to figure out, but we have, and we just kind of want to show you how to event things and make things happen, like the airship transferring from the airship to another map without having any glitches at all. I'm going to show you in this whole entire stream how to actually do that. Now, this is all pre-recorded, so it's going to go in a loop for probably, I would say, through the weekend. I know at one point it's going to have to turn off because Steam allows for so long, and then I'll have to restart it again, but not a big deal. We'll just keep doing that through the weekend. I'm also probably going to upload this to YouTube as well. That way you can go back and re-listen to it and re-look at some of the stuff and steps and techniques that I've done to basically do a lot of these things. Um, Other than that, I guess we should say the history of the company and where we come from. So, Not Allowed to Die Gaming Studio, of course, is my company. I've been disabled for about almost 8 years now, basically living in isolation most of the time. So, I decided I wanted to start writing. I've written a couple of books that haven't really been published yet, but we're working on that. One of them is a fan fiction called Baradune's Quest. So that one you can actually look up and read for free, which is a parody fan fiction to, I don't want to say it because, we're on this, but to another group. Easily to look up Baradune's Quest. Um, Other than that, I have another book I'm trying to publish, but it's a huge sci-fi, so I've got to get kind of basically make a name for myself before anybody will allow it because it's so long. But it's really good. A lot of people like it. I just got to get something out there, so I decided I'm going to make a game. I decided I can use RPG Maker because I used it when it first came out when I was a little kid. I was probably a teenager, I would say, and it was fun, but I didn't really get into it too much because it wasn't like you can now, where you can actually put it on Steam. It was just something that you could show your friends and all. I didn't have any friends who really played games, so it wasn't really something I got into at that time. But about November 4th of no, not last year because it's 2026, of 2024, I asked somebody who had made a game off RPG Maker which one they used, and they told me MV. So I ended up taking that, and I decided I was going to make a game that I really, really have always wanted to make. That basically, since I fell in love with Final Fantasy VI when the day it came out, I loved Final Fantasy IV. I used to rent it from the games place and all that. And Final Fantasy VI came out. I had to own it, so I saved up all my money and I bought it that day it came out. And I loved that game for so many years that I wanted to make a game just like it. That's just as ambitious, that has that kind of feel and look to it. And to be honest, RPG Maker, just their RTP graphics, just solid when it comes to looking just like what I wanted it to look like. So I decided to go and stick with the graphics and make my maps and all that off that. And it basically came out pretty special, which we're going to show you. I'm actually going to make a map through this stream just to show you I'm making them and all that, and go over a lot of the techniques of layering and all that kind of stuff. We're going to go over a lot of techniques, basically, of how to use RPG Maker, while I'm also showcasing dimensional gates as well, so you can see basically how the game works and kind of how innovative it actually is. So let's go ahead and switch to the game. There we go. And I'm going to turn some music on. Oh, gotta click on it. There we go. Let's see. So I can show you on this. Okay. I knew it was the wrong one. Sorry, I was testing this all out earlier. Here we go. I knew that music was wrong. So this is the PC that we created. Well, I should say I created. All of this programming's me. The only other person that really is a part of Not Allowed to Die Gaming Studio is Anthony Facilier, who has made all this original music that you're listening to right now. Amazing music, by the way. But all of the programming, so all of this PC I created. was basically to give us kind of like a meta station so you could have the entire world building also at your fingertips there. So like CNS News goes over the news of the Earth and how the Shetman Corporation rises to power and all that. So it's a way of basically bringing in that backstory without like somebody just telling somebody about it, but actually showing it. The movies and shows are really fun. Decided I wanted to add something that what had nothing to do with the storyline whatsoever, but it's just another content inside of the game. And so we have these movies and shows. Dragon Leaf, 100% original show that we made. We're actually working on season 2 and possibly 3 on that. I haven't worked on Space Troops yet because I want to make it a really long science fiction. Phoenix Square Y, though, is a parody on Dragon Ball Z. I just wanted to have that there to kind of bring in that humor that a lot of us kind of are missing in a JRPG that's serious. You know, we kind of need to sit back and laugh, which is what Places is also about. It's a 4-episode show that makes fun of soap operas, kind of the over-the-top, how soap operas just kind of like just over-exaggerate everything and just push everything. The other really fun thing that I've always wanted to do is put another video game inside of a video game that when you beat that game, you actually unlock things that make the other game, the main game, easier. So Laurel's Day is done, as you all know, because you can buy Laurel's Day. If you beat Laurel's Day here inside of Dimensional Gates, you're actually going to unlock Laurel's Locket. Now, Laurel's Locket is an amazing locket that basically is the ribbons from Final Fantasy VI. So all status elements are basically blocked. When you go to fight Dimensional Beast, the final boss and all that in this, you're going to want Laurel's Locket. Let me just put it that way. If not, it's not a big deal. You can have other accessories that block certain status elements. But you're going to want Laurel's Locket for $1 to wear. That way she can heal, bring people back, and she can do a lot of powerful things. Depends on the tomes you have, though. So her tomes, sorry. Hold on, that I have right now. My favorite tome of all time is Magical Inspiration. You're going to have to find Magical Inspiration. I can tell you where to find it. It's a really amazing tome, but it basically gives them all SP, 60 SP, just for her using some of her NP. And that's the entire party gets that. A lot of these tomes, like Leech Tome, it gives you magic from monsters. Concentrate Tome, she can actually concentrate and give herself SP. There's a lot of things like Transfer Magic Tome. There's so many tomes you can find to give dollar just sort of like an edge. And so it's a real good reason to give her Laurel's Locket, which I have here. Laurel's Locket is just, you really, really want that. There's also the Bartender's Brooch that you'll get at the very end at the mall. That's another one you're going to want. But pretty much enough with that. I just kind of wanted to show you the mechanics of that right there. What we're really looking at, though, is how did I program a lot of this stuff? So we're going to go into here. This is actually, well, you know, before we do that, to get to the PC, Airship Cabin, PC. So when everything loads, oh, I'm sorry, that's not it. Airship Cabin, there we go. So you go to the PC, you first open up the PC. It basically just runs a really simple program that just says like, welcome to the Shetman Corporation personal computer, loading pre-installed media. And then once it gets to the actual choice menu for the PC, that is all common events. So everything is programmed in here. And how I did it is it's basically choices with labels that jump you back to the choices. Every single one of these makes sure that there is absolutely no way out of this system, no matter what you do, unless you actually shut down the PC. And the reason for that is this is using images. So which I'll show you back here. Load up. Sorry, it takes a while because there's a lot of events in this game, so it takes a while to load them. But yes, what I'm doing here is basically loading a PC screen image. So it has a screen and a border. And the reason for the border is that way when we transition from other maps, that border stays there because I'm not fading in and out. And it always has that computer monitor border, always there no matter what. We also have the Shetman logo loads up. So there's a few pictures that load up here. starts to load and make it feel like a real PC booting. We have sounds, we have weights, everything that goes through here. I have this loading up. This actually, let me load this. These are actually commands that you use. There we go. If you here, I'm using the backslash dot to wait time. I am controlling basically the narrative on this, and then at the end it turns off itself. So the player has no control over how this boots or how this does. So it's basically controlling all of the narrative here. Then it goes and boots up this common event. Now the common event is basically starting out with the choices of you can go to literature, movies, and shows, all that. And then each one, of course, has choices in there where you can go into literature and everything. And that's all that is. Now, when you pick these, like this one, DB10, if you'll notice, I turn a switch on so it knows which episode's playing. And then I actually transfer the map to something called the title screen. So what that is, which is what I was going to show you, I jumped ahead, is each one of these has its own title screen. So basically, that PC common event is a hub to transfer you to another hub or like to another game, to another event or another map to run a whole nother thing that's outside of the main game. And that's what this is. This is the title screen that'll basically run, depending on what switch is on, it'll actually run which episode is on. And then once it does that, it transfers you to the correct episode, which this is the set for that episode, the map set. And then these are the characters, and then the event that basically plays the entire setup. Now, to do this, you basically have to, at the end, go back to some credits. I run the credits, and then the credits decide, do you want to watch the next episode or not? Now, the credits need to know which episode are you watching at this point. So to do that, I have basically conditional branches that are basically saying, if this episode switches on, well, then go to the next episode. And all the episode switches stay on, and the reason I do that is, if you notice it says this is on top, this is next, it's going to run this first. If this doesn't run, then it's going to run this. If not, then it's going to run this. So I don't have to turn off all the previous episode switches each time because it already runs without having to worry about that. Now, if you decide to exit the player, now I turn all the switches off. That way, when you re-enter the player, you're not like, say you want to go watch episode 1 or 2, it doesn't jump you to 4 because switch 4 was on. So we want to turn all those off. Also, once you end episode 4 on this place's show, it'll actually automatically do all this for you and take you right back to the PC. So it's a lot of eventing, if you notice. Which looks like a lot of work, but it really isn't. It's basically just meticulously going, okay, this next, this next, this next. So, and then of course we have the options of, exit the player or not the player. So it's really not as hard as it looks. It just looks like a lot more eventing than it is. Same with the games. So Laurel's Day has a title screen. It takes you straight to this title screen. Now this is a lot more eventing. It's pretty complex stuff here. Which is really what I wanted to show you. So every time Laurel's Day starts, I can't have the party's gold sitting there and showing. I can't have their inventory showing. Although on this one I fixed it. You can't fight, so the inventory doesn't have to be removed. But the gold still does, because it can still show up. So we have to basically put a variable that says how much gold you have and then remove all that gold. That way later on we can put it back. This is not even, that's something that was there, and I didn't remove the message rows. Well, state death. This is actually a switch that turns on a common event. That way, it's basically running, and I'll show you that later. It runs the actual game system to understand whether or not you've died in the game. Same thing with this, the End Laurel's Day game. That's another one that runs the system to know if you have actually failed the game. So we have to turn those switches off immediately because there is a rare chance that switches could be on for some reason. And it's always good to just turn things off when, at the very beginning of loading stuff. This is the Laurel's Day title image. So when you see that whole menu up that looks like a RPG Maker first menu, that's actually an image I made. That's just a picture is all. And I changed the message width here. This is the normal message width that RPG Maker is. I changed this because you could exit the game, and I want to make sure if you do exit the game that it doesn't mess up and leave this shorter with that I'm going to show you I create later. We do a lot of things like I don't want them going into the menu and seeing things. I change the actual color of things that way it feels like a different game. I have to remove my party, add new party. Now this is where we really want to get into because a lot of that you all know how to do. New game is pretty obvious. You want to turn on your meters, your switches, turn off things, put her HP to 100. What we're really going to get into though is saving your game. So this is actually a loading the game. So when we load the game, it's actually going to turn on all those same kind of switches, all our meters and all that stuff. But it's going to do an inventory replace on Laurel's day and change all your colors. All that stuff goes back. Now what we're doing here is a common event. And how Laurel's day works is so inventory store is not just inventory. So every time you save a game, it doesn't save to the RPG Maker save system at all. It saves to a save system I created on the PC. So how that works is it saves her HP, it saves all of her inventory, which is just like 4 different things. It saves on variables. Is this the switch? This is her name. So she switches characters from Katja to Laurel. So her image changes. When I do that in the game, I actually change her name as well. That way I can save the state what her image is supposed to look like. And that's what this is. We're actually saving her name into a variable. So if her name is Laurel, then this variable is saved as 0. If not, it's saved as 1. Now this variable here will tell me when I go to load it, is she Katja or is she Laurel? Now this is a switch state. This is a thing that, from my understanding, nobody's able to figure out how to save a switch state. It's very, very simple to do. So all you have to do is go in, switch Katja, which is 10. I just call it that. It has nothing to do with Katja, but it's switch 1004 is on. We also have an else branch. So if it's on, we're going to control the variable 1004. We're going to set it to 1. If not, we're going to set it to 0. Now, when we go to load to recall it, which is right here, if that variable is constant at 1, or I put greater just to be safe, there's an else branch. If it's on, then we turn that switch on. If not, we turn that switch off. This is how you save the switch state on a separate second save system outside of the RPG Maker. So this basically is allowing me to save Laurel's day onto the PC, but not onto the actual main game save slot. So if you were to save this onto the Laurel's day, which I can show you if we go back in, it basically, if you were to save it and then close out Dimensional Gates and just shut it down, that save would be lost because you still have to save the PC state by saving Dimensional Gates. So this creates a very immersive world that, from my understanding, some people have actually tried in the past and have not really been able to figure out as easily. Which I've got this. New, by the way, also I have to turn every single switch off. So I have a new game switch thing that switches them all off. This is the end game. So it basically just if once she hits Laurel's AD hits -1, which is actually a variable. This is not her actual HP, but if her variable hits that negative or hits 1, this will actually end the game. Which basically runs a whole. If you've played Laurel's Day, you've seen that. The other thing I really, really want to show all of you is how do you transfer from the airship that you're flying around in to the actual PC without having any mistakes, any glitches, or anything. This is the easiest way to find it. All of this is done in eventing. Okay, this is... Yeah, this is it. Okay, no, that's dimensional travel. Sorry. That is... This should be it. Okay. So what I do, first off, these are switches to make sure if I'm fast traveling, if I'm doing other things, this one is all that is. So basically, if people are hitting multiple buttons, it won't try to load multiple things at once. It'll only load this, and that's what those are about. But this is about... wait, is this the right one? Yeah, this is it. Okay. So basically what we're doing... Oh, I see where this is confusing me. Hold on. This is the right thing for fast travel. That was something else. Hold on. Where is? I apologize. It's one of these. That's when you travel back in. This is it. Okay. So what we do is, again, we have these switches on all of these. That way, if you hit page up or page down or whatever it is on the bumpers, you're not going to be hitting two once. That's all that is. But this is if you're in the airship and you press the shift button down, you can actually enter the cabin. So what I do is I turn a switch on that we're entering the cabin. That way, basically what that does is it tells all these to not run anything else. I put this transparent on the top, and the reason I'm doing this and having what it does is it runs nothing. It just turns itself immediately back off. Is to make sure the choices are exactly where I want them. It puts them not quite in the center, but a little bit above the center, which is exactly where I want them. So that's just a little technique to polish. It's not really needed to do this. Now we're gonna have the choices. Obviously, are to ask you if you want to enter the cabin or not. If you decide to, what I do is I fade out the screen. Now I'm on different maps, so you don't have to do all these dimension maps, basically switches. And this is the map ID of which map I'm on. So if you're not using multiple maps, you don't need to go through all that. But we do want to fade it out. I do have a switch to fade back in once we're in the airship, because once we transfer map, all of this event is going to turn off. It won't run on a separate map. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a variable and save the airship Y and X coordinates. So this is exactly where the airship is on the map. We're going to also switch on this switch as well, which I will show you later, turns on. Now we're going to switch to an airship transferring map. What should be this? Okay. This map is there for a reason. And the reason is, normally what people are trying to do is they're trying to land, get off the ship, and transfer to another map. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And the reason is the RPG Maker engine doesn't work that way. You have to be able to, first off, be able to land the airship. So if you're trying to land over ocean or anything that's unlandable, a mountain range or anything like a town, and that block is not able to be traveled on, the airship can't land. So when you go to transfer into your airship map, you're going to be a ship still because you never got off that airship. You have to be able to land to get off the airship. The next thing that's very important is waiting 60 frames. If you tell it to get off that vehicle and then transfer the map immediately, it's not going to happen because they have to. That airship has to land and the character has to the vehicle before the game engine will register they're off that vehicle. So if you don't do that, oh well, it's not going to get off the vehicle. Now the tint on the screen is something that's just to do with me. Don't worry about that. Now I transfer back to my airship bridge. And now that we're at the bridge, oh man, there's a lot of these. I'm sorry. It's one of these up here, I swear. So we automatically tint when we're on the bridge. There's the tuning crystals. Here it is, the airship fade-in. So what the airship fade-in does is it makes absolutely sure we're getting in. We wait 30 seconds, and then we turn that off. It's just to make absolutely sure during that transfer, because sometimes this one over here doesn't always work for some reason. It's the tint screen. So this is tinting the screen, but we're fading in on the other one. And that's very important, otherwise you'll just have a black screen. But once that happens, you end up right here, and you are the character standing there. Now, when you talk to her, we're going to transfer back, which is, yeah, fly airship. So we're going to go back to the airship transferring. Now, what we're going to do is go to this other map. And what this map does is it's going to get you on the vehicle. And then depending on the switch of what map I was on, it's going to take me back to the map. So, but what it does is it transfers the player back to the map ID I want. And then the airship and the X and Y coordinates. And then once I get back, it runs a little animation here. This is the airship move. So this animation does this. Oh, no, that's the transferring. Hold on. Oh, maybe it was back in here. It's at the bottom, right? Yeah, then I fade in the screen. Okay, so it's at the very, very bottom. So basically how this runs is depending on what switch is on, it tells me which map to go on. This is because I have 5 different dimensions you can actually travel with the airship. You don't have to go through all that. All you need is this transfer player, but you need to wait the 60 seconds first and after you do the get on and off vehicle because you need that character to make sure they're on the vehicle and that airship is all the way up in the sky before it registers they're in that airship. So again, you got to wait that 60 seconds. That's your glitch, everybody. That's what everybody's missing is you've got to wait those 60 seconds. You've got to make that airship can land. That's it. That's all you have to do to make that work. And it's all eventing. You don't need plugins. You don't need scripts. You don't need any of that stuff. Which I don't know if you've noticed, but this game does not use a lot of plugins. I don't believe I do have that on here. Okay, perfect. So as you can tell, I don't use a lot of plugins for this game. This is it. I have an audio streaming one that basically loads all of the music. I have over an hour and a half of music that has to load, and it loads as the game is booting up, not on the buffer as you're going into maps. So every time you go into a map, it just instantly plays that song. You get out of a battle, it instantly plays that song. I need this because a lot of our songs are like 4 minutes long, 3 minutes long. And RPG Maker Engine just, unfortunately, the way it buffers just does not, it's just not able to handle those larger songs. But because my composer is composing like these really magnificently thought out theme songs, we really just had to make sure that we had a way to load the songs because the wait times were getting too long. Some of them were up to 90 frames, which I mean, it's a second and a half, but it was just too much for me. I like the fact that this game, not using plugins and scripts, everything loads instantly. It feels like you're playing a Super Nintendo cartridge, and I love that about this game. And I love that about this engine. This engine allows you to do that. You don't have all those load times if you do things the right way and you don't bog it down because not a lot of people know this, but when you're using an engine, every time you use a plugin that uses scripting or changes things that are so like some of these plugins, like the audio streaming, that's not bogging anything down. It bogs down the initial boot up, which I don't really care about. You'll notice that if you play my game, it takes a little longer to boot the actual initial game up. That's fine. The rest of the game runs smooth. The Yep Core engine, the Battle engine, all these all run smooth. There's no bog down because they're utilities that tell it, I want you to do this instead on the battle systems. So there's no bogging anything down. Same with a lot of these core updates. And like this just does the updates for my games for you automatically. This one is amazing. The freeze fix one I found out in the wild, and somebody found a way to stop so the game does not freeze at all. There's no screen freeze, none of those issues. What it does is it constantly monitors the screen. If the screen freezes, it resets the screen. The worst you're going to see is if you're running across the map, you might see one block jump. You didn't even notice the screen froze. It just looks like, oh my God, what just happened? Something jumped a little bit. So it's really amazing plugin. The keyboard config is just so people can control config the keyboard they want. So again, this isn't slowing anything down. It's not bogging anything down. The message core is the reason I can control the messaging a little more and make like just where it's one line when you open up a box, things like that. So again, it's not bogging anything down. Animate tile option, again, it's basically there for if you have a computer that is not meeting the minimum requirements and it gets a lot of lag, it'll actually turn the animated tiles down a bit so you're not getting as much lag. So that's more speeding up the engine, if anything. And OrangeWorks is just to integrate it into Steam. So if you notice, all of my plugins, none of these are manipulating any part of the game really itself that would bog it down in any way. This is also the logo, so I show my logo. So it's all just community basic kind of stuff. It's the same with the scripting. I use bare minimum scripting. I use scripting to turn off all switches in New Game Plus, and I use scripting to set the regional codes for a couple of things on some stuff. That's it. So there's no bogging down on that. So everything in this game loads instantly and really fast because that's how an engine works. Because basically, you write a script or you have a plugin that runs on a script. The engine has to stop running and read that script and run that instead. And then once it's done running that, it restarts the engine back where it was. Now, this is very fast thing. It maybe takes a frame or two to do that. So one script, it's not really going to harm the game. It's not going to slow it down. One plugin that runs a lot, it's not going to harm the game, not going to slow it down. But when you bog it down with hundreds of plugins, you've got all these scripts running every single detail. So instead of like my PC, instead of doing it in eventing like I did on these common events here, like the Laurel's Day storing inventory. If I did that all in scripts, this would start bogging the whole game down. Same with these operating systems on the PC. If I did all of that as scripts and ran it through that, that would slow the whole thing down. Instead, I did everything in eventing, and I made sure everything was an event. Because of that, it runs exactly like an Super Nintendo cartridge. This is, I know it looks funny, the back door. This is if you can break my code. Dollar's house in the very beginning, not in the demo, but in the main game. If you can find the code and figure out what to touch in the right order and what song you need to play, it'll open up a back door to the airship. And you can actually get to the PC. You can play Laurel's Day and all that stuff right from the very beginning of the game. But you got to figure out the code, and no, it is not the code I've used in the past that I've showed streaming before. I'm trying to think if there's anything. Oh, yes, there are. Where's my inventory? Here's the inventory store. This is a very important aspect of the game too. This is called the inventory store and the inventory replace. This is every single item, every single item, every single weapon, every single piece of armor, every single key item, every single thing you would have in your inventory in the entire game is categorized in here as a variable. So it takes the variable and it removes the item. So it basically, so like on this, it takes the water cannon, it makes a variable that knows how many water cannons do I have in my inventory, and then it removes them. Inventory replace, it brings them all back. This is incredibly important for a couple things. New Game Plus, very important. I actually do the inventory store twice. And the reason I do that is once it's stored the inventory, and my inventory has 0 of all these items, once I do this again, it's going to take this variable and set it to 0. So it's very important in New Game Plus. Unless you have your inventories, like you actually purchase to store your inventory, this will wipe the inventory right out. The inventory replace, though, I have because between chapters, sometimes you have your inventory going back and forth, which I will show you. I have to do that manually. But on the PC, there are times you have to remove your inventory, and that's what that's for. So like Chapter 2, you're actually switching from dollar to Yane. So I have to actually take her inventory and remove it. That's what this is. I have to actually remove all of her inventory, and then I add the inventory that Yane has. When we go to Chapter 3, I do the exact same thing. We're going now from Yane to dollar, only this time Yane's not starting all brand new. So I have to remove all of Yane's inventory and then bring back all of dollar's inventory. Now, the only difference here is in New Game Plus, we actually skip this. And the reason I do that is otherwise dollar would get everything in New Game Plus and Yane would get. So I figured because it's New Game Plus, everybody shares their inventory, which I think is pretty fair. Couple other things I want to show you are the coordinated scenes. Where does it start? I think it's Canlin. Yes, it is. Okay, so a lot of the coordinated scenes you'll end up seeing where it's playing with the music perfectly with the beat, everything moving. This is actually not as easy as it seems. So basically what I'm doing, and now this right here I should show you too, this is how I'm able to make sure, depending on the armor they're wearing, what they're actually doing. So in these scenes, because it's not the player, it's actually events, I have to tell the event if they're wearing these clothing to change to those images. So that's what this is that you're seeing is, and this is control that. But how we are controlling these is I basically have to listen to the music and basically keep running through this over and over and over again until it lines up just right. And how I'm controlling it is I'm telling it to write this line instantly. And that's what these two things mean. Hold on, let me see if it pops up. There we go. So if you look there, it's basically, oh, that's, cut it off. If you look there, the backslash with that is basically display remaining text on the same line all at once. And then the bottom one is cancel that effect, that the text all at once. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just telling it to flash that line, flash that line, flash that line, and then flash that line. And then I'm telling it to wait a very specific amount of time to give you enough time to read all of this, up with the music, and then automatically, which I'll show you on there, that with a little caret kind of bump nose thing, that's do not wait for input after displaying text. That tells it to just close that text message. That basically what I've done here is I've taken all control away from the player. The player has absolutely no control over that text message box. all of these text message boxes have no control over the player. So it's basically running a movie. And to do this, when they're fighting in their battles and all that, each one of these events has to actually run its own battle sequence. So you have to line everything up with switches. And I'm basically telling it when this switch runs, now run this event, which this is probably them just running. So this one, I tell them now run this event. That's just to keep their clothing on. This is where they actually fight. So that way they're all lined up to fight exactly the way I want to, even though they're separate events, because I'm controlling it with switches. I'm telling it, okay, at this point in the event that's running, now I want you to run this. Now I want to run this. And that's how I run all this stuff and basically run everything to coordinate with the music, which a lot trickier than it looks. The best one is the new song we have, which we're going to start getting into a lot of that in a minute here. I'm trying to think, it's in RAM port. It's the bar. So this is the singer. If you pay her, she will actually sing a song that Anthony Facilier wrote the music and it inspired me to write some lyrics that are basically phenomenal. You'll absolutely love the lyrics. You've probably seen it. It's the second trailer on the Steam page. But basically, she will sing the song, and there's a lot of stuff to do to make this just right and perfect. And so when you're in the bar and you talk to her, this is what it looks like. And you have her piano player down here. But then when you tell her to sing, I actually turn these lights on here. He comes up here and starts playing the piano, and she will actually walk up and do some stuff. But right before she starts to sing, we change the map to make it look like a spotlight on her. And this is a instant map change. And the reason this works, I've got to remember which one is the actual event. This is the event. Okay. When we do it, the fade is none. If I were to fade to black or white, you would actually see it fade in, fade out. We don't want that. So fade is to none. And what that does is it instantly flashes to this map. So you basically get that effect right there where it looks like, boom, a spotlight just got a spot on her. Now she can sing this, and it feels more emotional because of that spotlight. Very, very important to have that in the scene. It really just brought the scene out more. I felt having the piano as well very, very important to the scene. If you'll notice her other lights, they aren't literally lighting up. That's because these lights on the stages are shining more on her. You know, that's how that kind of works. So I didn't want them to basically show as much there. Nope, we're in Thena. Perfect. So the other thing I wanted to show you is the party's house. This is where you can purchase a house and actually grow crops. This is a little trickier to do than you'd think. Basically, what I do is because there's three different types of crops, I have if you plant them, if they've grown. So it's really simple switches that just basically do the images of it, and then this basically controls you picking them. That's all it really is. And all that's controlling is a random number generator. It has an animation to show them picking it, and then the random number generator picks 3 to 5 to say whether you pick 3 or 5 of that harvest. That's pretty simple logic right there. The interesting logic that runs it is the battle win count. So what I'm doing here is when you plant the when you first plant something, it actually takes this variable and it actually sets it to whatever your battle win count is at that time that you planted it. So we now have that variable set, and it also sets the switch planted, so it knows what's planted and what seed is. Now when we go up here, now that switch tells it which one to run on this. So all of these are telling it which ones are planted and which planter and all that. So this is telling it we planted the Kokora in planter 1. This is the win count that's right now. So when you go to, it automatically checks this. It takes the win count. When you walk into the house, it automatically goes and takes the win count and sets it to this variable. Then it takes that variable and subtracts the other variable you created. And that gives you your win count. So now if the win count of this that it collected after subtracted is greater than 8, your Kokoras are grown. So it switches that on and turns the planted off. Basically how it runs the entire battle win system is on that right there. How I monitor it so you can do it is basically you're going into here and you're basically telling it to read those variables and tell you where they're at. So it's basically going back into this variable here and then telling you where that variable is. But it has every variable for every planter for every crop, so you know exactly how many wins you've done for each one. So it's a complicated system, but not too bad. And the seed system is the same thing. It's just a random number generator that tells you how many seeds you got. So that one's pretty simple. It's just the battle win that's kind of interesting. Same with the Elan. It's a battle win system, but it's a little more complicated than that. There's the end. So the end here, several different stages. This is the repaired end, so you can go to the end, it's repaired, and you can collect taxes. This is the roads are fixed. These are all different stages of fixing the town. Now, as you'll notice, the variable here, end taxes amount 250, end taxes amount 400, end taxes amount 600. What this is your maximum tax that you can collect. So what that is every time the more you expand the town, that's how you're collecting more in taxes, is that controls the variable that way. Now, when you collect the taxes, depending on the battles you've won, you collect a certain amount. So if you fought and won 18 battles, then you get to collect 100% of the taxes. If you fought and won 12, you get to collect 50%. If you fought and won 8, you only get to collect 33%. If you fought and won 4, you only get to collect 10%. If underneath 4, you get to collect no taxes. So every time you do this, as you can tell, it resets that win count. So when you collect your taxes, it'll reset that win count to be able to tell where you've done that. And then that calculates up here. It goes, where's your win count now before the house? And then it goes, subtracts that from this number that you had before. And then if that becomes that and that, then you do that, and then it resets that. If it's at 4, it won't reset. So it's a pretty simple system, but I just thought it was kind of interesting to show. Another one that's kind of interesting is, how do I make the NPCs do things? Glen at night. The end. Nope, wrong place. Sorry, the Temple of Gainor at night. At the end. So this person actually serves these people. And how I do that is the event basically controls almost everything. And how I'm doing that is the event is actually turning switches on and off. So this is actually just an image that the switch turns on, it runs the flame, and it does that while the switch is on. This is the it's some kind of weight. I can't remember what that one's for. This same thing for the sink. So all he's doing is switching on that animation. And this is just on stepping, so it does the animation and it runs the sound. It's all he's doing is just switching those on. I think this is him now that's the plate he puts down, and this is where he slices things. So he's just putting that cutting board down. That's all he's doing. It's just running through switches. So he's basically moving to each of these, looking at it, flipping a switch on and off, and then doing summations on certain things. And that's basically all controlled through these events. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of eventing, but I think it's perfectly worth it to make the entire world feel alive. Um, the next thing I wanted to show you is how we're making these maps. Let me close up some of this. If you notice, there are a lot of maps here. So this is the entire dimension of Athena, all the way up to there. So that's every single main place in Athena. On top of that, these are like all the towns' insides. So the night and day have their own insides as well, depending if it has a night and day. So that's Glen Night, and that's the night. This is the day. This has to do with robbing places and things like that. So there's a lot of things you can get lost in here really easily. A lot of maps. There's over 580 maps, I want to say, in this. We're going to find out right now because I'm going to make a new one. So we go to the airship cabin. We're going to the PC. We're actually going to make a map for Dragonleaf Season 2. I want a new map. So we're up to map 612 right now. So it's a lot of maps. This is going to be an outside map. We're going to call this Season 2. Now, what season two is about? I don't want to spoil it too much for you, but Jenny is going to find dragon leaf tree seeds, and she's going to try and grow some dragon trees. So what we're going to build right here is a forest. We're going to make a basically open forest where she's going to actually plant the seeds. So what I kind of want to start with is just I usually start with just a base flat like that. The grass, I'm probably not even going to keep this grass. I just kind of like to stick with that one. But because it's a forest, I'm probably going to do more like that. But that's the one. What I like to do, because this is a forest, you're gonna have sunspots where sun comes through and burns these little spots in it, and that's why I kind of did that green. Is sunspots kind of look like this a little bit when I do it, which I think comes out really, really well. We'll probably fine tune that more, but that's just just kind of throw it down. What are the best things to do when you're making a map? Start throwing stuff down. Don't worry about it. Just start throwing stuff down, and you can play with it and change it later. It's not a big deal to change things later. And what I'm doing here, I know it looks kind of funny. These are tree trunks for much larger trees. Yeah, I thought that was going to look funny. Now, if you hold down Shift, you can actually put a second version of the tile down, which is what I'm doing right here, because I do not like. It looks like a building, which is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a building, but we're making it look like trees. So I hold down Shift to get rid of that. The next thing that helps to make these look like trees is you're going to want to give them shade that looks like a tree. So we kind of shade this in. You know, they got leaves up there. They're shading themselves. And this one, this one we're going to kind of do that. We'll probably go a little like that. And that one's up there, so we probably won't shade anything there. This one will probably do more like that. And basically, when you're making a map, think of this as a painting. Like you're basically making art in a way. You're using all these different tile sets as your different brush strokes and your different things that you would see in like a paint program, and you're basically painting an image. As you can tell, this is already starting. I'm painting an image here. So you're basically like you want to play with it. Like this looks more like tree kind of shadows. Right there. The next thing I want to do is because I can't really do the trunks here and doing all that is we want to make. Where is that at? Oh wait, that's. We want to kind of do an open forest and then kind of like this kind of forest too. Kind of give it like a dual effect, although I really hate that. And that's another thing with maps is play around with what you're doing. Just keep playing around with it until it looks right. If you don't like something, take it out, do it again. It's a big trick with maps is you gotta like it's kind of like with writing and almost everything you do that's creative is you gotta rewrite, you gotta remake, you gotta redo, you gotta just keep playing with it until it's just right. And as you notice, we've already started creating a pretty good scene here. I'm gonna add some of these just to open that up. With the lighter grass, I always use different of these for different areas. The one thing I did forget. I like thick grass, so we're basically layering all this stuff. And just so you know, I'm holding down the shift button, and that's why none of the shadows are disappearing. Otherwise, the shadows would disappear. Oh, actually, maybe they won't on this. Oh, nice. You know what? Let's do it this way because I like this grass this way. Although this we will, 'cause that goes behind the tree. All right, so we got that. Let's get that around that tree. That looks pretty good. We're gonna add some more grass coming down. Because the grass, basically, you want to look at it. How would grass grow in this situation? And that's where I probably messed up here. Is it's gonna grow in the shade. in life, that's where your grass is going to grow. It's going to grow right. Oh, that's my fault. Hold down shift. Boom. Better. All right. So grass is going to grow where there's shade. That's where you're going to have that deeper grass. So that's what I'm kind of doing here is filling in the grass where it would actually be. Now, shade moves. So the sun moves throughout the day. So shade moves throughout the day. So I still like this spot. I still like that. I still like the grass not there and not being there because maybe the sun's setting a little bit. So this to me works perfectly fine. Now, what we want to do with the deeper grass, what I like to do at least, I like to add bushes. Not in this though, because they're not really working on that shade. Um, I like to add a lot of things in the grass because the grass should be wild. It should have all this stuff growing in it. And as much as it glows, it still kind of works. You also want maybe they cut down some. Well, no, it doesn't work with the larger trees. Like I said, play with this kind of stuff. Flowers work really good. They don't glow as much. And again, you want to kind of play around with it and kind of look, does this look right? Is this too much? So see this, it kind of looks patchy, which I like. This is what I was going for, is the patchy. And this, if you notice, is a little more uniform because it's a little more burnt and grass, things like that. So it's more what I'm going for is each layer has its own life to it. Trying to find. Here we go, some mushrooms. Add a few mushrooms. They'd be growing, around the tree trunks. Don't like that last one. Now let's use a regular tree trunk. So we're gonna have maybe some of these trees have been cut down over here. We just kind of want to make it look alive and like it really is real and fill in. We want to fill in the void is basically what we want to do, but without over filling in the void. So maybe like there's a tree thing there. There's more in here. So we want to kind of maybe, I don't like that as much as that. No, I don't like that either. Really don't like that either. I kind of just, see, and that kind of makes a line. I don't like that. Maybe just like that. The other thing I forgot, I like to actually do this sometimes. And it's subtle to see, but if you look really subtle, there's a different type of sand, basically. And it just kind of makes it look a little more open, a little more layered as well. And then we can also go like that. I'm not liking that as much. Let's bring that and like, ooh, definitely don't like that. That's too uniform. That's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah, that's much better. Okay. And as you can tell, sometimes it just looks too uniform or things line up too much. It's going to bother the player when they're seeing it. That's the first thing their eye is going to go to. So you want to just remove it. Another thing I like to do is to make the trees look more real is add things on them. Because, I mean, this is a forest. Things are going to grow up your trees. Like, it's just how that it's going to work. Yeah, I thought that was going to bury it too much. Yeah, maybe we got that going there. Maybe that's going up that. That's like that. And then we'll put some leaves on these. Don't like that. We'll go like that. That one. Oh, you know what? see it there. There we go. All right, and see now we're kind of filling in the trees so they're not empty space as well. Now this is not a map anybody's walking around in. This is what I call a because this is one of my shows that I'm gonna make. So to me, it doesn't matter if they can walk, but technically, I mean, they can walk through this, and this would make a very fine map for like a forest kind of setting. We're not even done yet either. There's still quite a bit to add. Nothing there. Definitely nothing there either. Okay, so let's look around. What can I add to that? Kind of not to the this kind of medium grass here. I want to kind of add something to it. Although we could add, let's add some leaves. I don't like those there. Let's add, there we go. Let's add some leaves here. I mean, these are some big trees. They're gonna drop some leaves. So we want to basically kind of fill this in a little more, kind of like a jungle kind of area. It's just because it's very thick. That's the grass. That's where things kind of grow. This doesn't have as much, but we do want to still put stuff there. Um, Possibly this. Just kind of have every once in a while. Yeah, that'll work. It's too close to that. Pop that there. No, I don't like that glowing. Yeah. So then we're kind of filling in the space now. So as you can tell, what I've done is I've basically layered a map in here. I've used the shadowing and ways to basically kind of highlight that there's trees here. There's a lot of ways you can change a lot of things. Like if I do this, now it looks like this kind of dropped down a little, although not really. I'd have to show you in a different map. Um, like I kind of like to do this too because these trees are going to kind of create some shadowing in here maybe. Um, Normally I would have a shadow here, but obviously this gets cut off and these are already shaded. But yeah, no, as you can tell, this is basically how you make a nice layered map. As you can tell, not too hard to do. It's pretty simple. This is what it looks like up close. I like to zoom out just so I have my edges out there. I can see kind of everything. But basically, it's going to zoom all this in, and this is what the player is going to see on the screen. If you make the map bigger, because I didn't make the map bigger, but if I made the map bigger, obviously they would move around that screen. But as you can tell, it's not too hard to do. I probably would have done this a little more. Let's kind of fill that in some. Maybe put that there. That nah, I don't like those. Yeah, see, I usually have these as my problem. Let's add these. So you add some of that. You know what? Let's change this. Hold on. Let me show you what sometimes happens to me. And I just don't like it, so I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to take it all out. Because once I built the map, I realized, I just really don't like the way I did that. So we're going to go back in and redo it. And again, I really like to add the bushes because I think they really just kind of add to it. Sometimes you can use these as well with the flowers, but I don't feel like this scene. Um, it's basically spring. She's planting the seeds at, so I don't feel like it needs flowers. Yeah, we didn't put the grass there, so let's use it here. And another thing I like to do is so when I put the flowers, I like to keep them a little bit around the as well. And the reason is it makes sense that they'd be kind of growing more like that. And these flowers, these are kind of wildflowers, so they make sense to be kind of loose and on their own. Again, I'm just kind of using logic of, if this was real, like, where would it be? You don't really have to do that on these maps, but I feel it gives it a open environment kind of look. It makes it look more pleasant, I feel. The other thing we could do, could add these flowers. No, I feel like they clash too much. Too many flowers. Let's do. I want something to fill that in. Let's do that. It's too close to that one. There we go. That one's there. That one's there. If I did that, that works. That doesn't work because the shadowing. Nah, that doesn't need to be there. It's filled in pretty good. Where are those leaves at? Throw some leaves in there. Kind of around the tree trunks. Put one right there. There we go. That's not bad. Okay. No, that looks good. That looks good. Yeah, that's not bad. And of course, Jenny's gonna plant her trees right in here. But yeah, so that's basically a map I just made, just to kind of show you this is how we're making maps. We're layering them. I'm sure a lot of you know how to make maps. I just kind of wanted to show that just in case anybody's new to dev making and they just didn't make maps really well. This is a great tool to go back and be like, oh, okay, that's how I make a good map. Um, The credit sequence is another one that's another interesting one because I sequenced it to music, but it has different. Basically, it has good and bad endings for all four characters that can switch. And how I control that is through this, and it tells it what to go through depending on certain switches. So basically, I think this actually controls it. Hold on. So this is the first set of credits, and it tells you if the switch that dollar killed the leech, then it takes you to the map in Thena, which is the good ending for dollar. I'm not going to spoil that for you. If not, it takes you to the bad ending. This one, if you saved Yanes and Navan, so if you actually rescued Sane and you rescued Navan and saved the village, this will actually take you to his good ending. If not, it goes to the bad ending. And then in that situation, it'll tell it whether or not he rescued his son or not. This one's the same thing with Freya. If you killed her mother, then it takes you to her good ending. If not, it takes you to her bad ending. And then Yosei automatically goes to the same ending. It just tells you whether he's a cleric or not. So here, we actually control good ending, bad endings. Again, good ending, bad endings. This is the lab ending. If anybody watched that, that's a very powerful ending. Just so you know, if you watch that lab ending at the credits, there's not going to be a sequel to this game. That's not what that's about. It's just about basically showing that mankind always ends up going. It's always going to seek power, and there's just never going to be an end to that cycle. How I control New Game Plus is another interesting one to show you. Basically, New Game Plus. I don't want to spoil any of that for you, but basically judges you on how you played the game, which it basically tells you here. They're basically used to purchase things, and if you were ethical or unethical, it can hit points or not points. Now, how I do is you have ethical multipliers. So what I'm basically doing is using control branches on whether the ethical multipliers are on or not, and then that controls your actual score and point. This is if you don't have an ethical multiplier. You basically, like on this one, if you, let's see what this one is. Okay, so if you defeat the dimensional beast, which you have to basically to get to that point, it's going to give you 100 points. Basically, you defeated the dimensional beast. If you defeat the final boss, that's a whole other situation that I don't want to get into and spoil for you. That'll also give you points for that as well. You don't actually have to beat the boss to get to New Game Plus. The final boss, if you die there, will take you automatically to New Game Plus. You don't see the credits though, but it's basically a way to restart the game, go back through more powerful to try and be able to beat that boss. This is not something that's set up to force you to do that. This is something that's set up to where if you rush and you try to get to that final game, you're probably not going to be able to beat that boss and you're going to die, and that's what that's about. If you took your time, you unlocked the lore, and you actually did things right, you're going to be able to beat that boss super easy. So it's basically just a mechanic so you don't get locked into the mall and stuck there. But it also allows it to feel, don't rush the game. Do it the right way, do things the right way, or you're gonna lose in the end. And it's basically this game is all about consequences. So if you do something wrong, there's all these ethical things that multipliers and all that. but there's also it'll change how the game plays and all that. It's all about if you do things a certain way, you can mess things up for yourself later, or just a lot of consequences that you can really just mess up. Okay. As you can tell, there's a lot of points you can earn. I believe my last run through, I earned 2,000 without any multipliers. Now, here's where you get to the actual system where you get to spend it. And what I've done is this is basically just a choice system similar to the PC where you can just buy, and you can't get out until you've actually, there's a lot you can buy, until you've actually told it to start a new game. Once you start a new game, you can keep any ethical points you have not used. No ethical points. So if you don't earn any ethical points, but you lost a lot of ethical points, you can't go under zero. So it'll bottom out at zero. You can't get negative. But if you bottom out at zero, you may as well just start a game at that point. It's basically what it comes down to. It's pretty hard to do that. You'd have to play pretty unethical, but not basically do anything the entire game and rush it. But it's there just in case somebody does that. It's just a fun little thing of what if somebody does that, so I added it. It's another way of making it, in my opinion, not a hobby game, but a real actual game, is making sure you do all those little things. Another fun one is the animations. We ended up doing this last minute, but we did a lot of custom animations. I'm talking hundreds and something animations. So a lot of these, what they're doing is they're taking all the RTP animations and I'm reusing them in a whole new way. So this is a smoke thing that I'm using as a cloud that actually does that and does the lightning. So each time he levels up, he has a more stronger lightning attack. All I've done here is I've taken one of their things and I've added another to it. So I've added the thunder to it as well. So it's just adding things to it and changing things around and manipulating things. And you can create whole new effects, but you're still using their RTP. So it didn't cost you anything. You don't have to go out and buy things and do all these different stuff to make it work. You're basically just playing with it and making new things. So this is my arc thrower, or if there's a taser attack, it's just a sideways lightning. That's all it is. I didn't have to go and out and get extra stuff. I can use what came with the game. This is my flaming strike. All it is it's their boulder strike where I add a fire around it. Lava wave. I just changed it so it looks like lava. Same with the toxic wave. This is all RTP. Her fire there. This is all RTP. All I did here, RTP. It builds the stone and it hits you. All I did is had it build the stone and then I threw it at them. And I used an extra the cure thing here to make it look like the stone is being put together. It's all RTP. I didn't create any of that. I didn't have to do any of that. Again, all RTP. I just changed how it works. And I added things. That's all it is. Sniper shot. I just changed how that works. One thing I did do, though, that is new, if I can find it, is the arrow. I did have to make this RTP. There is, or not RTP. I had to make this arrow image. Not too hard. It's just 3 lines to make the shaft. I made a triangle. You color it in, and then just some things for the feathers. Really easy, simple to make. But I feel the arrow just really adds to it. Another I did do for animations, I believe is under the armorer. Sorry, I gotta remember where I put them. Yeah. So these are missiles that actually launch at the Dimensional Beast. I have 2 directions. So I had to make those, and I also made a serum. These serum actually move, is why it has the 3 and does the animation. The serum inside the needle actually is moving around and waving. It's hard to see because it's small pixel art, but it does move around if you pay attention in the movies that play. And these are these stage lights as well. So I did have to make all that myself, but that was pretty much all I had to do myself. Everything else in this game is RTP. Everything's character maker through their character maker and all that, or I use their tile sets and change things around a little bit. But all of it's their RTP, their eventing systems, all of it. The only thing we really added and changed was the music. There's a lot you can do. Another fun thing you can do is change around with the status. There's a lot of fun things you can do here. So Yane can use a smoke screen to basically escape any battle as long as he's got 60 or I think 50 SP, something like that. But I don't want him to be able to run through boss battles. So this is actually a status effect that I effect on him every boss battle that clears itself out at the end of the battle, but it basically makes sure he cannot use his smoke screen. This is called Raging Hatred. This is something that a boss can actually use on themselves to boost their agility, attack, and magic attack. It's something the demons can use. Story mode critical is another good one. So in story mode, because they're auto battling, I don't want them to hit criticals and accidentally kill themselves. So I'm actually controlling that. They can't do that, and they can resist all the different states. So nothing looks off, and the movies that play out look right. And magic reflection is another really good one. This one is to basically build a magic wall, which is very important. Have a If anybody knows who the Magus sisters are from Final Fantasy, I have a Dr. Mangalo, which is basically a parody on Dr. Mengele, because I do a lot of fascism and Nazism in this on the Germanic and the Shetman Corporation. So he is basically a parody of Dr. Mengele, and he uses this system that the Magus sister uses. He uses two drones, and one of them can basically heal and bring everybody back to life. But that one always has a magic wall on it, while the other one's constantly curing them. So it basically runs off the same system. It's really fun system. Another fun system we added was the summoner system that I want to show you. I don't think that's one of them. Magic summoner. That is not one of them. Magical goo. I'm sorry, I have a lot of troops to find the right ones. Castle guards, spiders. Shetman tech. No, too far. That's definitely too far. Muggers. They should be right around here. Muggers. Fairies. Come on with it. Where are you? Where are you? Here we go. Okay. So this is the summoners. What happens is they first start out, they actually summon. This is all an animation I set up. But basically what happens is at the end of every turn normal, and I do this on every turn, if the summoner's knocked out, it doesn't do anything. If not, what it does is it takes the okay, I forgot. I had to remember how I do this. So if the nightmare is affected out, it turns a switch on. So what that switch does is it here's the nightmare death. What it does is it turns around and says it's affected by knockout. It turns the switch off. Else, what it does is it runs basically. There is the nightmare, and then there's another. I don't know if I can grab it. There's actually another enemy behind there. That's an invisible enemy. That's number 5 here. And what that does is that tells it where to play the animations. So the Mystic Summoner casts a fake spell that it has. So it basically just looks like it's casting Summon Nightmare. And then all that does is it recovers that invisible enemy, casts Heal 1 over it, waits 60 seconds to make sure that Heal 1's like casting a little bit. And then the Nightmare comes back from knockout. I bring back all of its HP. And then I knock that invisible enemy back out. And then I turn the switch off. Same thing here. I knock all those invisible enemies out. And the reason I use the invisible enemies again is just to do the animations, so you can see how the animations work. So, and I basically use the same switches on every single battle. So when every battle starts, I like to switch them off. Some of them don't, so you'll actually see the summoners summon a third one. Sometimes it does happen. But mostly they work pretty well. How the leaders work is the leaders... Let's see if this one works here. The summoner is affected. The leader has to be killed first before the summoners are knocked out. But then the summoners have to be knocked out to kill their summons. So it's all basically just all in the eventing. There's no plugins behind this. And this is story mode. Story mode on all the bosses basically is just a mode that I just play everything out. I force every action. I end up putting in dialogue in some of them. And I just basically just force everything. And then at the very end, I knock the troops out. Battles won. That's it. That's your story mode. And that's just flipped by a switch. Very, very simple. My enemies, again, these are all basically RTP. I only have a few. This is downloadable content that came with the engine when I bought it. And I have a few. I also have no image monsters. These are for I was trying to do, and I still do use it a little bit where they you have to hit the monsters in multiple different spots. Where's it at? So these are another one that I have another artist I use for packaging. Otherwise, everything's RTP. Oh, I did not mean to do that. Cancel. Yeah, otherwise everything's RTP, but I really like her artwork. It just looks really good. So, and it really mixes with the RTP. So I ended up getting that package and using it. You'll see her name in the credits. She does a really, really fantastic job mixing it with the actual RTP. Obviously, you have your weapons, items, your skills. The skills, just so you know, every enemy doesn't use attack at all. They use their own skills. So I have a lot of skills. Not done yet. Yeah, I have a lot of skills because even enemies that use the same skill, but you're later on in the thing and they have like they're upgraded, I have to use a new skill for that to make it stronger, basically. So there's a lot of that. Classes is another one where they all change classes. They have four different classes. I have a ton of actors because there's a lot of NPC actors that you actually do get to play with a little bit, or they fight in battles. Um, there was one other thing I wanted to show you, but I'm not remembering it. Oh, battle. So I actually turned the battle musics off. And the reason I did that is every battle I start my own music. So every battle has whatever music I want rather than having the RPG Maker just having one straight battle music. That way, if you want to change a battle to a boss battle and you have this music on, it'll start this music and then change to the boss music. I didn't like that. So even though it's more work, that's part of what makes this game special is I did all that extra work. But it really pays off when you do that extra work. I'm not kidding. It just really, really, really pays off, and really shows up in the game. And a lot of this stuff you have to find discs to unlock and to on the PC for the vending machine. So it's really interesting on that aspect too. Um, there was something else I wanted to show you, but I'm not thinking of it. I can tell the intro is a huge mess of events. This is actually the very first thing I ever programmed, November 4th. I was just testing things out. I loved how it came out, and so I decided that's the intro scene, which is what you've all seen. I played with it maybe a little bit to change things. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as it's always been. Same with Fane. I created Fane, and it's just there's a lot that's changed in Fane, like map-wise, the way it looks. But this was actually all me just playing around with the RPG Maker, and I liked all of this and created it into the tutorial. As you can tell, there's a lot of very detailed maps. Hold on, it's better if I zoom out. A lot of detailed maps. Like I basically didn't want to mess around, and I wanted it to look and just fill everything in and make it look alive. And I feel like it accomplished that with these maps. I even made some where like you have to find your little path in to get to the treasure chest. Um, there's just a lot of interesting different dungeons, a lot of different towns. I mean, you've all seen stuff like this. This is all our typical RPG Maker, but what makes this game different is the eventing processing, not using the plugins, and just a lot of the concepts behind it, like Yalan, where this town you fight it back from monsters and you're able to repair it and rebuild it in your taxes. And I showed you how all that works. And it's a nice way to make gold in that. In this house, you get to grow your crops basically to help Dollar out and your mage to basically be stronger in her battles. So there's just a lot of interesting stuff. And then you have these world maps are huge. So even if I zoom all the way out, there's still world map. That's how big these world maps are. And every single one's the same size. They're just really, really huge world maps. These are one of the first things I actually started to make were Fina, Canlin, and Germanic here. Just very, very huge world maps. Hoyt is basically just an island, but it's also Remur, which is a cloud basically. It's basically the concept of heaven, so everything's up in the clouds. Um, Where is Cerebum? And there's Cerebum. And this is basically hell, the concept of hell. So you're down in this like area that's like inside the crust layer of the planet. So we just really wanted to add a lot of different dimensions to and that's the other thing is I added all these dimensions. One of the reasons I did this game the way I did was because of the RTP. So you go into these tile sets. I basically went into them and said, okay, well, I have a fantasy world. That's what those are. This is all fantasy world. I have science fiction sitting here. What can I do with this? And I was like, okay, well, I can actually use all this even more by basically combining the science fiction with the fantasy and making all these different worlds. And that's what I did. And I started making all these different dimensions. And then that's where that concept of heaven and hell came from. Okay, well, instead of a dungeon, what if the whole world was the dungeon? Well, now we got hell, we got Cerebum. And then the story just started unfolding from there. It basically started with Dollar and kind of unfolded from there. Once I figured out Yane, I pretty much knew at that point that who Yosei was and how he was going to come into the story, and who Freya was and who she was going to come into the story. So by the time I got to chapter 2, like right towards the middle, pretty much where the demo ends, I knew how the whole story was going to kind of play out with the mystics and everything. But there's a lot of surprise at the end. The Dimensional Beast is not your main boss. He seems like it because we play it out that way, but there's a lot that goes on after that beast. You end up going to the mall. I was going to show that. The elevator is another interesting one. All I'm doing is, if you've played the game already, I'm just scrolling the screen and I'm moving these events. So I have everything just lined up perfectly. So these scroll up while things scrolling down. So it looks like that's going down while those are going up, or vice versa. And so it's just a lot of tricks that you can use to use the engine to look like you're actually doing things that aren't you. You basically aren't. The mall is another attention to detail I like to do is outside of things. You can actually show the outside. It just kind of gives it a lot of attention to detail. The mall's another one I just kind of wanted to show you, like just how large it is. It's a really large mall. So, but it's basically the world of Earth. This is all you get to travel in Earth. So I wanted to make it really feel like you have a lot of culture, and that's what I did. I have a clown walking around. I have people eating. There's just a lot of culture going on in this mall. There's people playing tabletop games. I actually have gay couples in this game. I have a lot of different situations that are set up that are just background stuff. They have nothing to do with the game. They're just in the background just to make it feel real and alive. I think you'll all really enjoy playing this game a lot. But I think all the devs, the RPG Maker devs, I think you'll really enjoy just playing it just to see like, oh, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. Oh, you can do that. And I think it gives a lot of ideas that I think a lot of you, once you played it, you'll be like, oh, I could do that. I can do that. I can do that. And I think that's what makes Dimensional Gates really special is this game proves that RPG Maker engine on its without scripting and any real plugins is just an amazing engine that works. You know, I hear a lot of people going, you need to go to Godit or you need to go to Unity, you need to do this. You don't really need to. If you want to make a JRPG, RPG Maker engine is the way to go. Probably the easiest and fastest probably loading engine too. It's really easy to learn. It loads fast. It's fast to learn. It's got tutorials. If you go to this help, you've got tutorials to learn things. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this. The fact that you can lay an image down every single frame, and you can change the frames up to every 60, I think, per second. You could literally run a movie that you lay down every single frame that would run 60 FPS. And then you could have, I mean, I didn't do it in this game, but it's totally doable that you could do that. Another thing I was going to do in this game that never came up was a random battle generator inside of like Laurel's Day had a random battle. So in that one, I couldn't use this system's random battle because if you died in that battle, you would die and the whole game would end. And that makes sense. If you failed Laurel's Day, you don't want your player to die. That makes no sense. The main game ends. That makes no sense. So I created a system that random number generates 1 through 30, and then it picks every time you step on a block. It does that. Whatever number pops up, it then picks out of a list, say number 25 or 13 or 2 different battles, or you got 3 different battles you want on that map. And you just set it up like that. And it's basically the 1 in 30 random number generator. So every time you do it, so if you want two different battles, you have to go one. You have to have 60 different, 1 through 60 every time you do it. But every time you step on it, it has a 1 in 30 chance to trigger one of those battles. So there's a lot of things you can do that you don't have to use the engine's automatic systems that you can actually program yourself. Another thing that you probably would love to learn. So like in Thena here, you can actually get a canoe and it allows you to like go into the water. So all of these events right now, if you were to try to land an airship, they wouldn't land on the airship. So I actually created an event that once you got at that airship in chapter 7, it takes all of those events because I don't need them anymore and it moves them all right here to this mountain. That way now you can land the airship anywhere you want. And then on other ones where they're in the way, but they can't really be moved, I have it only when you're flying that airship, it moves them all to like another mountain spot that you couldn't land anyways. So that way your airship can land anywhere. That's another trick that it took me a while to learn, but once I figured it out, oh, it was really, really cool to learn. So basically now, instead of not being able to land over here, you can land on any of these squares now. There's a lot of tricks once you learn this engine. And again, I've been playing with this engine since November 4th, 2024. So we're talking 15 months playing around with it. And so I'm showing people here right now, there's a lot you can learn and fast, and you can make really easily using RPG Maker and Gacha Games engine systems. And I also want to pay a shout out to Gacha Games too. I do want to thank you for making sure I could stream. I had forgotten to set that up, and Gacha Games basically bent over backwards to set it up so I could stream during this festival for you to all see this. I do want everybody to know that big thanks and shout out to them for setting that up to make sure you could all see this and understand how this engine can actually be used and how to. I think one of the most important lessons in this one for a lot of devs would be the airship transferring system. Mostly because that seems to be something, even to this day, people in the forums are still trying to figure out. Like, well, what if I use plugin? What if I do? And nobody's really got it quite down. So I've basically showed you how to event the whole situation, and it will never glitch on you ever. You will never have an issue with glitching. There's not a glitch. It's not a glitch. The engine works perfectly fine. You just have to understand how the engine works to understand how to event it. And I think one of the biggest problems that creates this stigma on RPG Maker engines is a lot of people don't want to learn how the engine works. Let me just kind of switch back here. They don't want to learn how the engine works, so they do plugins and scripts because it's a lot easier to just write a script or do a plugin than to sit there for several months learning how does this work, how do I make this work. But once you learn how to make it work, you can make choreographed scenes, you can make shows, you can do so much with this engine because the engine's set up to basically do anything. You just have to know or learn how to do it and have the mind and the ideas to create. Once you have that, you can create any. Like Final Fantasy VI would have been really super easy to create on this engine. Oh my god, they would have loved this engine to use rather than using all the coding. So I honestly think RPG Maker is an amazing engine that doesn't get the credit it should because a lot of people do a lot of scripting and plugins. So you see a lot of lag, you see a lot of things that aren't working because people aren't bothering to learn it. But once you learn it, like just like Unreal Engine, just like Unity Engine, somebody who's an indie developer who doesn't want to learn the engine, the game's not going to look good, it's going to work good. But somebody who takes the time to learn it, it's going to look good. It's going to look AAA. And that's what this game is all about. Dimensional Gates is proving that RPG Maker, even the MV, not even their brand newest one, can still look like a professional game and be a professional game. It's all about the dev and how they use it and how they learn the eventing and all that. And I'm not trying to say that devs who don't use all eventing are wrong. I'm just saying this game is to highlight how good the engine itself is without doing that. You can use plugins, you can use scripts, and the game runs perfectly fine. There's a lot of people who are able to do that. There's a lot of games that have stigma because they don't run fine. The scripts and plugins fight each other. So those can bring stigma. There's just a lot of stigma that comes to RPG Maker engines that I think people are seeing the engine in the wrong light. You just have to look at engines as you're always going to have a dev who's doing a hobby. You're always going to have a dev who didn't really learn the ins and outs, but you're also going to have devs who did learn the ins and outs, know how the engine runs, and they're going to give you a really good game like Stardew Valley. That person learned the ins and outs of the engine, and it is a phenomenal game. We all have to agree. Stardew Valley is a really great game. RPG Maker, they basically have these engines that run amazing games as long as you have the ideas, the concepts, and the will to actually take the time to program that eventing. One of the things I hear a lot in the forums is a lot of these people have the right ideas. They know how to event it. They know how to. They just don't want to take the time to do it. And here's something I could show you. This is my dedication to making the game right. Where is her HP meter? That's her menu. Where is her HP meter? Hold on. You're going to really appreciate the work. By the way, this is the tabletop game. All of these comedy events run my tabletop games. Death Battle, HP UI. So how her HP UI, that little bar you see up when you're playing Laurel's Day works is conditional branch. If her variable equals 100, it then pulls this image up on the screen. I had to program all 100 of her HP. Most people wouldn't do this. They would find a plugin, they would find a script, and they would do it that way. Problem is, this is constantly running. Because it's an event, this is not bogging the game down at all. There's no lag. No, oh, sorry. I'm showing you stuff on the wrong screen here. So this here, I basically had to program every single one of these. So this is the variable, and this is the image. So every single one of them for every single 100 of these. I have 100 of these I had to do for every single one of her HP. Now, the reason I did this instead of just using a simple plugin is the plugin would be constantly running nonstop. Okay, what's the variable? What's the variable? What's the variable? What's her HP? What's her HP? Okay, and it'd be constantly. So it's constantly turning it off, turning the engine on, turning the engine off, turning the engine on, constantly doing that. That's how you create lag. Because I did it in eventing and I did it through conditional branches, there's absolutely no lag. All this is doing is if it's this, else, 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 else. So it runs through, and once it finds it, it does that image. None of that stops the eventing. It doesn't lag anything, and it runs flawlessly. And that's why I took all that time to do that. It pays off to do that extra work. And kind of what this game is about is showing people too. It pays off to do that work. But one of the things I really wanted to prove with this game basically is just that RPG Maker. I don't even care what the engine is. I don't care if it's XP, MV, MZ. They're all flawlessly really good engines, and they get a lot of bad stigma because a lot of people hate on the RTP. But as you can tell, this isn't that same flat RTP you see a lot of. Yes, it's the same images, but look at how stunning their art is. Gotcha Games for MV right here. This is stunning art for JRPG. This is what a JRPG should look like. I love a lot of the ones that people do for Earthbound. I love that art, but I wanted to do a Final Fantasy kind of look. Oh, sorry, again, I'm not showing you it. But I mean, if you look at all this art, it just fits. It's what it should be. It's just flawless artwork. And I think that a lot of stigma comes from it because a lot of people don't use it in the layering fashion. Like if you notice mountains, what I did is I laid these down first, these little ones, and then I lay them out. It gives us this layered effect that gives it just so much more of an effect. There's just a lot of things that I think that, and you got to fill in your spaces. You don't want to fill in your ocean. Your ocean's empty, but all of your land, everything should be filled in. You don't want any empty spaces. You want filled in land. You want everything filled in. And once it does that, like this, you notice I have dirt, I have rocks, I have all this stuff. It's just to fill it in so it's not an empty space. It gives it more layering, basically, and more life to it. And that's the other thing with the NPCs running around and doing what they do, and they do different things, is I wanted to give the game life. And I wanted to show people, like, this is RPG Maker. If you do everything without plugins and scripting, it can run a lot of stuff all at once. Navon, we're running over 35 NPCs at once with animations and other events as well. Run stepping animations. All of that's running at once. There's no lag whatsoever. So it was just a way to prove that as well. I think I'm going to leave it at there. If anybody does have any questions, definitely leave it in the comments section here. I will be looking back at that towards the end of this and maybe answering some of those. And go ahead and maybe I'll answer it in the news segments on my game page. But basically, what this was about was to show people during the festival the hard work that was put into Dimensional Gates and also how well the RPG Maker engine actually is, which I think is a very important thing for this festival to show people that RPG Maker engine is just as good as the Unreal Engine. It's just as good as Unity Engine. If you want to make a JRPG, you want to make a 3D Last of Us game, yeah, you're going to want Unreal or you're going to want the Unity Engine because you're making a 3D game like that. But if you just want to make a real like nice JRPG, like, and it doesn't even have to be the Final Fantasy VI quality. You've seen plenty of games like I'm trying to think of that To the Moon and stuff that use other different sprites and things like that. You can make all that with these RPG Maker games. It's all going into the tile sets and changing those tile sets to make it look. You can make it look like Earthbound. It's all there, and the eventing is just this flawless programming if you do it right. And really, you don't have to learn how to code at all. Yeah, I had to learn a little bit of coding to do a few scripts because that's my game's very complicated that way. But most people don't have a complicated game like this. They can learn RPG Maker without learning any coding whatsoever and make a professional game. So that's probably the main goal that came from Dimensional Gates was to prove that and to prove that like I showed you with the save system, I have a separate save operating system that uses variables inside of the RPG Maker system. So you could do almost anything with this RPG Maker system. You just have to be innovative and understand how the eventing works and play around with it, and you'll learn a lot. I learned this all in 15 months, just so you know. And to be honest, I did it all in probably about a year, I would say. And I spent the last 4 months kind of fine tuning some things, and the last month I was just kind of just playing around with like the battlings and stuff, and not really doing much other than playing with stats and things. So I mean, it took me about a year to learn how to master this program. So it's not a hard program to learn, and you can basically you want to learn how to you want to be a game developer. This is where you learn. Start with RPG Maker. Buy RPG Maker during this festival. It's a deal, and go from there. You're going to learn basically. You might not learn coding, but you're going to learn what's called. I'm trying to think of the word, but it's basically where events like you learn the flow of the code. Because it's kind of how I showed you inventing. I wasn't worried about the other switches because I know the code flow is going to grab that first and then move from there, and it's not going to get to the other ones. That's all about learning code flowing. It's all about learning how your code pieces together and how it works. And that's where RPG Maker teaches you so well how that coding works, how it flows, and it's such a great learning tool for that. But as I'm showing in Dimensional Gates, it doesn't just have to be a learning tool. You can make a very professional grade game. All those old Super Nintendo games, boom, they all could have been made with RPG Maker easily. All those professional easily could have been made with it. It would have been probably much easier than what they did to make their games. So RPG Maker, again, just it's a really great engine. If you want to learn how game deving, I'm suggesting it right now. The festival, great deal. Buy RPG Maker. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can get MV, but I personally do recommend after using MV to get the MZ because I like the widescreen. And I probably, if I do another RPG game, which I probably will, I'm going to get MZ for that. Just because I want that widescreen and I want that there's extra options in MZ. But if you want to learn first, I would suggest getting both. Get MV and MZ. And the reason is MV isn't as complicated, so you can learn a lot on that. But then you have the best of MZ as well. And a lot of times they have bundle packages, so you can get a really good deal on that. But the reason I say get both is right now they have a really good deal on it. So you never know when they're going to have a deal. Why not just get both now? Plus, you got the assets from both games that you can use on either one. Either engine can use the art because basically it's just using artwork. So you can just add that artwork in there. Boom, you're done. Again, if you want to become a game dev and you're debating on it, I really highly suggest start with RPG Maker. It's a great system. If you've done snap maps on Doom, you know the Doom. The Doom 4 or whatever that came out. If you've done snap maps, you love doing that. You're gonna love RPG Maker. It's the same situation. It's eventing. The exact same way to program, and you're gonna absolutely love it. So again, my suggestion: get RPG Maker. This again video is going to loop around. I might put it on YouTube depending on if people ask for it. That way people can go back to reference it. Otherwise, this is going to keep looping around for probably, hopefully through the weekend. We'll see if Steam allows that. And we will see you on the next loop around.